B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh V'Natzliach. Today's probably one of my favorite all-time topics that I would always dreaming of giving a shir on, because I think probably in today's modern world, it's one of the most hardest things to avoid, and that is triggering outdoor motion sensors on Shabbat. And part of that, towards the end of the year, we also talk about how about triggering, is it okay to be recorded? Because nowadays you have Ring cameras and people literally, even in private residences, it came up already a long time ago with the Kotel, that they, for security reasons, you have, is that okay to be recorded on Shabbat by security camera video? We're going to dedicate tonight's shiur, for the refuah shlema of my dear grandmother. And I just wanted to remind everybody, the reason why we're doing all the modern halacha on Shabbat, some people forgot, is because this year we didn't blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and they said for a protection for all our soldiers that we're dedicating this year to, and all the hostages that should be released, we should learn the laws of Shabbat. I'm also dedicating this shir for the refuah shlema of my grandmother, Parvin Bat Chanum Aga, and Rab Mordechai ben Mazal Tov. So let's jump right into it. Now, I want to just say, since I've seen some people that unfortunately are not so knowledgeable about halacha, of course, if you own a home and there's not life-threatening reasons why you need to have your motion sensors that we're going to trigger the lights to come on, as a homeowner, the right thing to do is to disable the motion sensor, because this is different than turning off your home security camera system. But every time you go in and out of your front yard or front door and the motion sensor comes out, it's just, even maybe by the time we end this year, especially for Sephardim, that we're more lenient in this case, it's not the biggest deal. But if you have control over it, as we'll see, Rav Avadia himself, there's something called the spirit of the law, that we don't want to be triggering lights coming on and off for no reason. So I just wanted to put that discord out, that the right thing to do in the spirit of the law is, if you have control of disabling these motion detector things in front of your garage or your front yard or backyard and everything, just tell the electrician to put it on and off button so the whole system turns off. Now, if somebody has dangerous neighborhood and then it's like a life-threatening thing, that could be a different story. But an average situation, now, we know that obviously on Shabbat, we're not allowed to turn on and off the lights. That's the most basic of the laws of Shabbat. But here, you're just trying to be a good Jew, go to shul, go visit your dear mother and father, your in-laws on Shabbat, go to your friend's house. But now so many countless houses have these, for security reasons or for whatever reason, they have these, a lot of times unintentionally, you trigger the light, the motion sensor triggers the light to come on and off. Now, is that allowed? Is that not allowed? Have you desecrated Shabbat by you triggering the light on and off? Now, this is one of the most important general rules of Shabbat, called what, Shani? Davar she'eno mitkaven. Davar she'eno mitkaven means that an unintentional result. This is one of the most classical things that's talked about in the Gemara, where there's a machloket Rabbi Shimon and Rav Yehuda in the Gemara in Betzad Daf Chaf Gimel, and the Talmud says Davar she'eno mitkaven, which is an unintended action, is permitted, and we're leaning according to Rab Shimon, right? So let's say, classical case that the Gemara says, you want to have a nice picnic in your backyard on Shabbat, so you're not carrying anything, it's an enclosed area, but there's a bench. And you know some people have grand estates. So by pulling the bench, you may create a groove in the land. So you're not allowed to make grooves because that's one of the, like chorish, that's like plowing. That's one of the first of the 39 things. So the Gemara says that let's say it's a super heavy bench. So even then Rab Shimon agrees that pesik resha, they say, right? So these are very important things every Jewish has to know. If you don't want to be amhar, considered an ignoramus. Davar she'eino mitkaven is unintentional result. Pesik resha means that even Rab Shimon agrees in Talmudic halachic terms. Yes, I agree that if you're trying to do A and unintentionally B happens, it's okay to do. But that should be doubtful. It's only possible if it happens, like pulling the bench. But if the bench is super heavy, that for sure it's going to become a deep groove in the land, and you're digging up all the dirt and making a big line, then Rab Shimon says that's called psik reshe, which is a guaranteed result. And then even Rab Shimon said, even though it's unintentional, you just want to move the bench, but you're digging a hole, he says you're not allowed to. So maybe superficially speaking, in this case, you have to walk across the street, and it's like you did a big avera by triggering the thing. However, there's a very important rashba that both Rav Ovadia brings in SHABBAT, volume 5, I believe Teshuvah 29. One of the classical cases of davar she'eino mitkaven and pesik resha is a fascinating one. This is the Gemara in Shabbat, which is really one of the Mishnayot. The Gemara in Shabbat in 106b says, and the Gemara talks about this on Daf Chav Zayin also, based on the Mishnah, that one of the forbidden things that's do on Shabbat is to trap animals, right? You can't go fishing on Shabbat, you can't go hunting birds, you can't go around and chasing after animals and throwing them into your traps. So you could... Now let's say you live in the middle of the wilderness, you went to take a Shabbat walk, very safe neighborhood. Lo and behold, you see there's a deer in your house. Are you allowed to close the door because it's cold? Or you don't... It's night, you want to go to sleep. Whatever. The deer could be in your backyard. But you're trapping it. So the Rashba says, the deer came in as by accident into your house, on its own accord. You closing the door, you're technically trapping the deer. But your intention here is not to trap the deer. Your intention is that the freezing cold weather or the bugs or whatever, to protect your house, right? You don't want open borders. So he says that no malacha, no forbidden action you haven't violated Shabbat, right? Another golden rule we have to become aware with is malacha. Malacha is one of the 39 forbidden labors on Shabbat that causes us to be defiling and violating and transgressing against Shabbat. He says even the fact that it's a pesik resha. Now, how do we understand this? Because comparing and contrasting in the case of digging the hole by the bench, right? Dragging the bench is also, for sure that, why is this allowed? For sure that the deer is going to get trapped. So,
meaning it's not intentional, but you're doing it anyway.
But it's a pesik resha. We said, when does Rabbi Shimon say unintentional actions that could be sinful or allowed, Shabbat labor and violating Shabbat allowed, is because you don't care. You don't want, you're trying to move a bench to have a good sunlight, whatever, right? So Rabbi Shimon says,
not benefiting from that.
Right, and Rabbi Shimon says that's fine as long as it's not for sure that you're going to create a groove. You're not sure. It's a light bench, and most of the time when you pull it, it scratches the surface. It doesn't create a deep hole in the ground, like groove, like you're digging up dirt. It's fine. But Rab Shimon would agree that if psik reshe, right? But here's a psik reshe in the case of the deer. You get what I'm saying? So the Meredika, the Avnei Nezer and Rav Avadia and the Chelkas Yankiv, they explain the Rashba, very important Rashba. They explain that here it's not, it's even further removed. You know why? Because you're not directly chasing the deer. You're randomly doing an innocent act of closing your front door, right? So you don't, it's called grama. This is another, so these are very important words to understand in the modern world especially.
Yeah, concepts.
Yeah, grama means in halacha that it's indirect. It's like causing something to happen indirectly, which is really what the motion sensor is. So basically, they explain that since you don't come into direct contact with the deer, and you don't intend to trap it, so you have two things here. It's not only davar she'eino mitkaven, unintentional act. It's also triggering it indirectly. So it's indirect and unintentional. So the Rashba holds that even psik resha, even though, right, psik resha means if you cut off the head of the animal, for sure it's going to die. You didn't want it to die, right? So he says, even though here for sure you're trapping the animal, since you have two things to your benefit, it's grama, which is indirectly. You didn't chase after the animal. You didn't, right? It happened by triggering. It's like a chain reaction. You started a chain reaction that eventually is going to lead to it being trapped by closing the door. But that's not direct. It's like you're one step removed.
Yeah.
So it says the even an unintentional thing, and really, it goes much deeper here. The case that was asked to Rav Avadia was a very interesting one. Similar question. Now I want to say my own chidush. Baruch Hashem, I was zochef 3 years to learning Kolel, the laws of Shabbat. I wanted to say my own chidush on this, but based on all these different heterim, according to the Rashba, triggering the outdoor light is definitely not desecrating Shabbat. Why? Because one's intention is purely to walk in the street. Do you even care? I would say, if you remember when we were in Santa Monica living, the alley, all the neighbors had the lights. We would go out, we'd try to go out of the front door, but I would say that a Jew that's very pious and religious, it makes him cringe when the light comes on. He tries to avoid it. So, first of all, one's intention here is purely to walk on the street. Now, if it's unavoidable to avoid the sensor, according to the equation that we just said, it's a grama, right? You're not directly turning on and off a switch. You're just triggering it. It's indirect. And it's davar she'eino mitkaven, right? It's an unintentional result. So in this question, according to the Rashba, it would be okay. Now you should know that there's a Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim, one of the great Rishonim, he argues on the Rashba. And he says that in the case of the Rashba, it's a problem. He doesn't hold of our equation. He says that even if you have davar she'eino mitkaven and a psik resha, which means unintentional result, but it's automatically for sure going to happen, it's problematic. It's like at least rabbinically, it's violating Shabbat. So the Ran believes that the case of the Mishnah is speaking of a situation where the person closing the door is not aware of the deer. He only found that the deer, he was not cognizant. He wasn't aware that the deer was even in his house. Once he closed the door, then he found that the deer is there. So does he have to schlep the deer out of his backyard? Or can he go have a nice, good night's sleep? Thus, according to the Ran, and the Maggid Mishnah says, it could be that it's more problematic to trigger the light. You understand? Now, the one of the great poskim of our time in America is Rav Schachter. His opinion is that if one can be strict, because the Ran holds it's a little bit problematic, according to the Ashkenazim at least, one should try to avoid, whenever possible, triggering the sensor light. However, if it's out of your control, like one of the great poskim of Bnei Brak, he was a student of Chazon Ish. You know who the Shevet HaLevi was? The Shevet HaLevi was one of the biggest, in Halacha, he's probably one of the biggest students. Him and Rav Nissen Karelitz was one of the biggest students of the Chazon Ish that became the posek of our generation and Bnei Brak, and has hundreds of, probably even up to 1,000 teshuvot. He says it doesn't make sense that the Torah would forbid you what? You have to be held hostage. Let's say every single one of your neighbors is paranoid, right? And we're going to get to Rav Wozner later. It's impossible for you to step inside of your apartment or house by not triggering these lights, right? So all the poskim would agree that it's you could rely on the Rashba. The Rashba was one of the greatest in his generation. The Rashba was like the Rambam and the Ramban of his generation. You don't know how great the Rashba was. Rabbi Kiva Eger held the Rashba in such great esteem. So, and especially for Sephardic Jews, the Shulchan Aruch seems to be of the opinion that once it's unintentional, it's indirect, even lechatchila, it's okay. You understand? So, you definitely have not sinned if you have done that. Now, the problem with this approach is that the my understanding, to make it bring more of a leniency out, is that you have to also understand one thing, and that is there's another. I just want to say that anybody that thinks that they know all the laws of Shabbat and they're expert in it, I thought I was an expert in it, but till a few weeks ago, it's a sea of information. It's an ocean of information with the details. And I think one of the best customs every Jew should have is every Shabbat. I've been doing this for the last almost 25 years since I've been married. Is every Shabbat you learn 2 laws of Shabbat. Right, your Shabbat table. Everybody knows that's been to my Shabbat. We have Divrei Zimra, Divrei Halacha, Divrei Torah. One should, and Rav Volbe writes this in the Alei Shor, because it's really if you don't constantly reviewing, and there's new technology and this, like we're seeing today. See, there's another reason to be lenient, in my opinion, and pretty soon I'm gonna prove to you that there's 5 reasons to be lenient in our case. You know what they are? It's very clear, Rav Avadia writes, even the Mishnah Berurah writes this, that a psik resha, even though, right, you didn't, it's a davar she'eino mitkaven, right? You don't want you're not looking to desecrate Shabbat. It's an unintentional result, but it's going to happen for sure. But the la nichale means, and this is really what Rav Avadia brings for those that want to look it up in the halachic source. Rav Avadia in volume 7, page Kufnun Aleph and Kufnun Vav, Rav Avadia brings Shalosh Teshuvas Chesha Va'efoid that says in a certain municipality in Europe they had a lot of crime. You would get fined. Every person had to put a floodlight, motion detector in front of their house, because the police department and the city wanted to curb crime. So what is a Jew supposed to do? So he says that again that and God forgive me, I don't know who Shalat to Teshuvah, who this posek was that wrote this responda, but he again says this whole shtickle story that for sure according to the Rashba it's no problem, but he says even there's another heter that we're going to see. It's a little bit more problematic if you live in an apartment or a condo. That is that most modern cities, you don't need the light. The night light is not beneficial to you. You understand? It's pesik resha de lo nichale. Okay, it's the violation of Shabbat. The light is going to be triggered, but de lo nichale. You're not happy with the result. But the Mishnah Berurah says either you're not happy or you don't care about the result. The result is unbeneficial to you. So one other thing to keep in mind, which I want to thank Rabbi Jack, they're one of the great authors online halachic resources, is you have to understand that the Cheshav Ephod and Rav Avadia and Rav Wosner and all the posts can bring this, that most of the time you're not going to trip and fall. The light has absolutely no benefit for you, right? You could perfectly walk safely on the street because of the street lights, and there's so much light pollution anyways, when you come on an airplane, which means here the light has absolutely no benefit to you, right? It's not illuminating your way better. So we have to know that Rav Avadia Yosef's opinion, and I apologize, these shiurim take many hours to prepare. I wish I had a few more hours to look into it, but there's at least 6-7 different examples that Rav Avadia holds according to the Sephardic poskim, that any time you have a rabbinic, right, violation of Shabbat, it's not deoraita, right? Like last week we learned. This is very important to know that he says, so the issue is most of these lights are LED now, right? Everybody wants to save on gas. And Edison and all the DWP, they don't want to have to build new factories. The vast majority of these motion sensors lights are not incandescent bulbs. So anyways, you're just triggering what type of light? A LED light, which is that Deoraita Shani?
No.
It's the Rabbanan. And Rav Avadia, and I apologize, I didn't have time. I had to go to a meeting right before the shir, but there's 6 different amazing cases Rav Avadia brings, and he uses this equation. He says it's a psik resha, right? The la nichale, which means, okay, it's a rabbinical violation of Shabbat, but you don't care about it, right? It's not benefiting you, right? It's not helping you enjoy your day more or making a better convenience for you. Rav Avadia holds psik resha de lo nichale, an unintentional thing you're doing on Shabbat that doesn't provide any benefit to you. If it's only a rabbinical sin, it's allowed. So you understand? Nowadays, it becomes much more deeper. But I wanted to bring out in the RCC, actually one of the great poskim of this Chavke, I forgot his name, but he gave a very eloquent shir on this many years ago, like 10, 12 years ago, about these motion sensors. And he mentioned that one of the great poskim of our time, which speaks English, he's American actually originally, Rav Usher Weiss, the Minchas Usher, and Rav Wosner also writes the same thing. They write that there's more of a heter. And you know what the heter is? The heter basically says the Torah only forbade constructive work on Shabbat, right? Which means Shabbat is a day of peace, it's a day of harmony, it's a day of rest. So Hashem doesn't want you to do strict labor, hard labor, constructive work. But he says here, Rav Asher Weiss says this is not Melechet Machshevet. This is another one of the golden rules that if you want to know the general guidelines of Shabbat, you have to put in your dictionary and take notes on. Psik Resha was one of them, Davar Shein Mitkaven was one of them, right? Grama was one of them. Another one is that the only forbidden anything that is not Melechet Machshevet, which is not real laborly work, like hands-on hard work that you're actually hands-on doing something, automatically becomes only rabbinic. The Torah only forbade. Now, sometimes the Rabbanan, even it's not Melechet Machshevet, you understand? It's not like a constructive labor act. They also forbade it because they wanted to keep the spirit of the law. But definitely, in strict Torah law, if you're turning on a light, but it's not... Rav Asher Weiss and the Shevet HaLevi say this is not Melechet Machshevet. This is not constructive work. This is walking. I mean, and then, and I want to read you because he writes it so eloquently. Both Rav Wozner writes this, and he says that Shabbat, let's go back to the basics. What is Shabbat about? He says Hashem doesn't want you to do hard labor, work, tedious, nitty-gritty stuff like selecting the good from the bad or cooking, which was our shir last week, right? Hashem wants you to sit back and enjoy. But he says, if you're just trying to get home, you know what I'm saying? Let's take for a second a case where, the case of the Machsha Ephod, right? You're living in a more dangerous neighborhood, or in the case where the city, they're going to fine you unless you put a floodlight to deter robbers. They don't want crime in the city. So even if once the floodlight gets triggered, the police will see it, or the community patrol will see it. So he says here, putting everything shani aside that we said, that it's only a grama, you're not doing it directly, you're triggering it, it's unintentional, right? Mm-hmm. Here, purely speaking, the argument that these poskim are trying to make is that this even doesn't even enter into the realm of Meleches Machshevetz or Malacha altogether. This is not labor altogether. Right, so therefore, they hold that obviously we all have to agree that there's no mitzvah to have like a game of jumping in front of these light motion things. As my great friend Rab Michal Mutamedi told me that Rab Yitzchak Yosef told him that when Rav Ovadia Yosef visited in London, he told the Rav before they were going to walk from the shul back Friday night to the Rav's home to sleep, he said, wherever there's a motion detector, I don't want to trigger it. Tell me he would walk across the street, even though it caused him 5-10 more minutes. So definitely, but Rav Ovadia himself writes regarding the Kotel. They had put 1 million security cameras. So is it okay to go visit the Kotel because you're going to get recorded? This is when the first... and there's LED lights there, and sometimes it flashes when you walk in front of it, these cameras, because it starts having a sharper HD. It's like it has artificial intelligence. So when it sees somebody walking by, it takes a sharper image. So again, Rav Ovadia says for sure there is no problem because they're trying to deter terrorists. So therefore it's a shayla pikuach nefesh. But let's say even though they were just doing it for basic security, financial security, not, right? There, it's literally, if it's going to help them save a Jewish life by catching a terrorist before, he slips through, that Rav Ovadia, it's like a no-brainer, right? But again, this is a fascinating thing that just opens up the sugya in a whole different light, that Rav Wozner and Rav Weiss bring, that say that this whole motion sensor thing, if you're just trying to get innocently home and you turn it on, it's not even malacha. It's walking. At the end of the day, you're just trying to walk. Now, is the Torah are your neighbors going to be able to hold you hostage? Even if you trigger 100 motion sensors on your way home to Shabbos? No, because you're walking in the end of the day. All of these are not even coming into the thing. And you should know that one of the greatest poskim was Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Rabbi Akiva Eiger does go with the Rashba, even though the Magen Avram doesn't. So I wanted to bring in an innovative heter. And this is something I've always wanted to be able to... By the way, Rosh Shlomo Zalman also seems to say, concur with Rabbi Ovadia, this whole knowledge that, listen, it's it's a grama. You have just so many things here that are benefiting you that I just wanted to end this year with another reason to be lenient. There's in the Bet Yosef in chapter Shin Chaf Aleph in Hilchot Shabbat brings a shibulei leket. One of the things that's forbidden to do on Shabbat is what? Grinding. You know what grinding is?
Of course.
So you're not allowed to, like the chefs, if you watch Gordon Ramsay on YouTube, they say like it tastes much better, supposedly, freshly ground pepper. Are you allowed to do that on Shabbat? No. But you have to know, in the olden days, that there was no market to go. So a lot of times people would have salt rocks. So now the guy's food is tasteless. So the Shulchan Aruch brings a very interesting heter in chapter 321 of Shulchan Aruch Hilchot Shabbat, halacha seif 8. He says one is allowed to, with his hands, grind the spices, the pepper or salt. Or even if you don't, mortar and pestle for sure you're not allowed to use. But let's say you use a back of a knife and on the table or in a plate, you're allowed to smash it. How is that possible? It's a halach in Shulchan Aruch. In the end of the day, you're grinding. So there's a shibulei leket, and I'll read the shibulei leket quotes Rabbi Yeshaya. He says, how could I say this is allowed? He calls it a shinui gomor. He says, usually you use a mortar and a pestle. Here you're not using a mortar, you're using the back of a knife, right? And you're not using the mortar, right? You're doing it on the table or on a plate. So since this is totally dissimilar to the classical mortar and pestle or grinder that they commercially use to grind stuff on Shabbat, it's allowed. So I wanted to say that's for sure applies here. What did the Torah tell you was forbidden to do on Shabbat? Don't light a match. Don't turn on an incandescent light, right? Here it's a shinui gomor. Here you're. Anyways, me personally, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I inadvertently turn on these motion triggered lights, I get mad, and I try to avoid it.
Most people do.
So most people do. So again, it's going. I'm just saying this is just another side of the coin of what Rav Asher Weiss and the Shevet HaLevi are saying, is that the Torah doesn't forbid you to walk home, and of course, when possible, avoid, if you know what's in front of you. Okay, it's better to try avoid it, but bottom of the line, here it's just so many different heterim. So just to review, the reason why, if you're in a hotel situation or wherever, it's unavoidable. Like, there's a bigger problem though. Some people live in these fancy condos, like a penthouse in Panama. My friend told me, Rabbi Motamedi, that they asked of Gidon ben Moshe, an apartment building, they're trying to save electricity. When you walk into the hallway, now it turns all the lights on. So that is more denichale. See, you are benefiting from it because it becomes more problematic halachically, because it is true it's unintentional, but
there's a clear benefit.
There's a clear benefit because you're not in a dark hallway. So then there was very wealthy Jews that were living in these high-rises, penthouses, very wealthy Jews. They said, Rabbi, what are we going to do? This is how we don't have control over it. We don't own the whole high-rise building. I own the penthouse. When I use the stairs, I trigger it. When I use the thing, and it makes me very uncomfortable. I didn't know. So Rabbi Kinon ben Moshe told them an interesting thing. He said, buy a dog. Park your dog outside a shul when you go to shul. When you go to shul, have the dog trigger on all the lights. That's above halacha. But we already saw that based on this whole intrinsic shear that we had, there's 5 reasons to be lenient here. First reason that Rav Avadia wrote this heter is based on the Rashba, right? You're not directly turning on and off a switch. You're just walking. It's grama. And it's davar sheinu mitkaven. It's unintentional result. It's not a result you're looking for. So the Rashba holds that's okay. And Rabbi Kiva Eger Paskins like that Rashba. Secondly, nowadays that most of the lights you could assume are LED. You have the heter of psik reshe de lo nichale. In a case of motion sensors in the street, not in the hallway of the penthouse or the buildings, but randomly in the street, there's more than sufficient light that just turning on is just to deter burglars. It's not, the light is not benefiting you. It's not a plus. It's not a minus. If anything, it's a minus. There's more than enough street lights in the thing. So, and the light is the rabbinic, even though it's 100% going to happen because you know that the trigger. But Rav Avadia holds that according to the Shulchan Aruch Sephardim, psik resha de no lichale, even though it's going to an unintentional thing, that is even for sure going to happen if it's a rabbinical sin like LED lights, it's okay. Then you have Rav Wosner that makes a very compelling argument. He says this is not even bichlal malacha, right? This is not even in the category of work. Because what type of work did the Torah forbid? A constructive type of laborless work. This you're innocently walking and randomly they take you hostage and you know, as I said, that's why I started this year. Of course, if you're in control and you could turn off your own motion detectors, it would be better to do that in the spirit of Shabbat, even though technically probably if they're LED, it's not such a problem. But maybe it is because it's the nichale. It could be it's the nichale because it helps you see your door better. Okay, that's something else. But and finally, there's the reason that I said it's like, listen, on Shabbat it's forbidden to grind. But if the grinding that you're doing and the grinding that the Torah forbade are 2 different worlds, then it's okay. And for sure, what the Torah forbade was starting a fire with a match, which was labor, right? You're physically doing something. Here, since you're physically not doing anything, right? It's a shinui gomor. I believe that we could use the shibulei leket. Hashem should help us to always delve deeper in Shabbat, always review. I'll just end with something very beautiful from Chacham ben Zion Abba Shaul. He said, why do we say in Tefillah, V'tein b'libenu bina lahavin lahaskil lishmor lilmod v'lalamed, right? What does lishmor mean? He means a person, he says, a person could learn Torah, but it could go in one ear, go out of the other if you don't review it. So when we beseech the Almighty that we should keep, because la'asot means, okay, we should carry out the Torah. What does lishmor mean? To watch it. It means that, and the Rosh Kollel in Baltimore just put out a big video. They were asking, like, what's the main way to learn? He said it like 7 times. He says, review, chazara, chazara, chazara. Without chazara, we're nothing. And that's what it means, lishmor. Whenever you see in the Torah, lishmor v'lasos, lishmor means we give Hashem, it says, Hashem, give us the patience and the clarity of mind not to be lazy, to review our learning. And hadron alach, that's why whenever we finish a Masechta, we say we just begun it, we're going to never forget you, and Hashem should watch over us. Because if we keep Shabbat properly, Hashem will keep all of our soldiers safe, all the Jews of the world safe, no accidents. Like this shir should also be for the neshama of Chaim ben Eliyahu ben Chaim. Amen. Ken Yiratzon.